Welcome, welcome to the Empower Hour. I am AlQamar,
And I am Hanifah.
and we are here with you each and every Monday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we come to you with impactful topics of discussion that affect our everyday lives. Today is going to be a lighthearted, interesting yet lighthearted. We usually tackle so many heavy topics, and so this should be a breath of fresh air, family. Joining us this evening is Miss Evette Lang. How are you doing?
I am well.
Good, good. We appreciate you coming on and sharing your story about in vitro fertilization.
It's in vitro transfer, yes.
Oh, did I say that? Pronounce that wrong?
So it's the same, but it's just a little bit different.
It's called in vitro transfer.
So if you want me to explain, I can explain like the difference. And so some people, they have children of their own, and so they put the embryo in themselves or whatever, or they fertilize the embryo the egg while it's inside of the mother. And so my situation was they put a full embryo, already the egg and the sperm, inside of me, and so it was a transfer.
Oh, got it. Okay, and thank you so much for that correction. Yes, and as you can hear, Miss Evette is here to talk to us about her journey through in vitro transfer. So I met you. I'm sorry, Hanifah.
No, I'm saying welcome to the Empower Hour, Evette. We're
Thank
glad to have you. Go ahead, AlQamar.
I met Miss Evette a few weeks back, and it was so interesting. And I didn't know her at all, and she came through the restaurant with a friend of hers, and we got to, chit-chatting. It was a group of us, and somebody mentioned something about the test tube baby or something to that effect. And you said, it's ironic y'all say that, because in my experience, and then you just basically opened up and shared so much about what you went through, and I found it fascinating. I know I asked you about 100 questions and I said, we have to get you on this program because this is just so interesting. So thank you so much for being open enough to come and share your story with us this evening.
No worries.
Yeah. So let me ask you, just take us to the beginning. Take us to the beginning of how did this come about?
I think that is so interesting. There was a couple who was at my church, and we knew each other in passing. And so I remember them from at the church that we were going to at the time. They have a married, like a premarital class. And so I'd gone through the premarital class beforehand. And so we were there just sitting in, like kind of helping out, like doing like secretarial stuff. And they were there. And so they remembered us. And I remember I had just had my second child. And she was passing in the lobby. She was like, I want to ask you something. And I'm like, okay, cool. And we just kept passing each other. And I was like, she keep on saying she want to ask me something. And in my mind, I'm like, they are going to invite us to dinner. Like, my mind is always on food. Like, I love like, y'all going to invite us to dinner. This is wonderful. And we kept missing each other. And finally, one day after service, she pulls me aside and she was just like, listen, she was like, you have children. She was like, you just snapped back. She was like, would you carry our child? And I was looking at her like, that wasn't a dinner offer that I was looking for. That was not what I was looking for. And so at the time in my mind, I'm like, I would definitely say, yes, this is not something that would cross my mind. Never had I thought that I would carry somebody else's child. But I was married at the time. And I was like, this person is never going to let me have somebody else's child. Like, that is not going to happen. And so I never told that person to whom I was married. I was like, there's no purpose in me saying this to them. And so life happens. And so at a particular moment, we got divorced. And so I was at the courthouse. The divorce papers were signed, went back to who I like my normal name. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I immediately called her because I had her number and I was like, y'all still need that baby?
Mm.
And she was like, what? And I was like, do y'all still need that baby? And she was like, yes, yes. And so I'm like, as long as we don't have this baby during the school year, what was my other? I said, we can't have the baby during the school year. And you definitely have to take your child.
Mm.
Like them joints right there, those are non-negotiable. You can't have it during the school year and you got to take your child.
Yeah.
And so she was like, yeah, she was like, but there's more to it than that, but yes. And so that was in fall, almost winter of 2018. And that's when the journey, 2018, that's when the journey started. And the baby didn't come until July 2020. So it was
Oh,
a
wow.
long journey. And they had like, I'm excited about you guys hearing from them because they had a story that came before me. Like they'd
Okay.
gone, like tried other surrogates. They'd gone through their own journey, like trying just the in vitro fertilization for her. Like they had done so much. And like in my heart, I was like, yeah, because I don't want any more children. I was like, I'm good with the ones I have. But I was like, I can do this. And so people are always like, oh, well, you know, I've never met a surrogate. And I'm like, neither have I. Like, no, like I would have never known in my life that I would have done that. And so I liken it to like CPR, right? And so you see someone, you know, over there can't breathe. Like, are you going to do it in that moment or whatever? And something in your mind, something in your heart knows before it actually happens that you're predisposed to do that thing. And so I just feel like I was predisposed without knowing it. And so in my mind, I'm like, if I can help somebody, I'm going to help somebody. But that's the first and last time. Like,
So Yvette, prior to all of this, what were your thoughts around surrogacy? Like, what was your thinking around? Because you know, people have misconceptions and different ideas and even judgments. So, what was your thoughts around surrogacy before you even got to where you were just like, I'm doing this?
so it's so funny, like things that don't impact you, I don't think that you necessarily like, I'm gonna talk for me.
Yeah.
Things that don't impact me like that, I don't think about.
Okay.
And so like I was never in a position where I was like, oh, I need somebody to like carry this baby for me.
Mhm.
Or I haven't known anyone who couldn't have a child and then went surrogacy way. Like people that I like, they were like, well, let me foster a child, let me adopt a child. And so it wasn't something like that crossed my mind like that. And I think like you hear about people who are celebrities doing that.
Yeah.
Definitely
Right.
hear about Caucasian people doing that.
Yes.
You never hear about Black people doing it. And so even whenever I let like my family know, people was like, these white people. Who baby you carrying? And so I don't think that I thought about it that way, but there was no judgment. Just hearing her story and everything that she'd gone through up until that time, like I think about it and I'm like, she'd done everything possible to have her child through her own like body, and it just the fact that she couldn't like you think about people and you're like, well, that shouldn't be a reason why they can't have their own child. And people are like, well, you could just adopt. And I'm like, yeah, you could say you can adopt, but then you don't think about the other psychological things that go with that. That child at some point, if you're like that out and open person, you're going to be like, oh, this is where you came from. And then that child's going to go looking for their parents. You're going to feel rejected because you like, I put all my heart and soul. And then they still want to know. And it's not that the child is being disrespectful, but they also want to know where their roots are and know like there's nurture,
Right.
but there's also nature that comes into play. And so for me, like it wasn't something that I had to think about. And, you know, I'm blessed and fortunate to have been in a place where I could be in a state of like ignorance, not bad ignorance. It's just like I wouldn't have known.
Yeah, yeah. It's such a fascinating story, like you said, because you are the first and only Black woman that I've ever met to go through this process because it's just not prevalent in our community.
So caveat, I just remember something. So I had coworkers at my previous place of employment, and so they both had, still don't know their surrogates, but they both had children through surrogacy, but it was because they were homosexual couples.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so it was like a different thing. And even
Yeah.
that was like far out in my mind.
Yeah.
But then they have a reason for doing that because
Yeah.
they don't want somebody going. So this is like, I know this female, this is my seed. And so that still is their child, if that makes sense. So
Right.
I did know somebody, but not in that
Yeah,
capacity.
in that capacity. Now, do you know why? Did they share with you? And for the record, family, we did. I did reach out to the parents of the baby, and there was a miscommunication. They said I heard last minute that they were interested in coming on, but for some odd reason, I didn't get the reply in time. So, but we did reach out to them, and they definitely are on board with this conversation. Did they share with you why they chose you in particular?
So it's so funny because they had other surrogates lined up, and people, like, it's a whole process. They do psychological evaluations. You have to do like all this, like test it, like it's a whole bunch of stuff. And so they'd gone through several people before me, and she was just like, God just placed you on my heart. And I was like, well, that God did. Okay, Lord. And so she was just like, no, like he just placed you on my heart, and I just needed to ask you. And I can say honestly, it couldn't have been anything but God, because I wouldn't have been like, hey, come ask me.
Right.
Like it wasn't anything in her, like I wasn't on anybody's list. I wasn't signed up. Like there are banks of people who are surrogates, and there was no reason for my name to be anywhere. And so even whenever we went to their we went through Shady Grove Fertility, who is amazing. They have an amazing success rate because they have done the science, and they make sure that they have the optimal candidates. They do an amazing job. And so even whenever we went through, they were like, oh, well, we found our own surrogate. They checked me out and double checked and triple checked and was like, are you guys sure? And they were like, well, she meets the requirements. Like she's had a child, like Shady Grove, they won't allow someone who's never had a child before to be a surrogate.
Why is that?
Because they want to know that it works, right? And so if you've never had a child, there's nothing to say that you can, right? That it's going to be successful. And so you aren't supposed to have had delivery by C-section. Definitely not more than once, but they're not trying to do that because they don't know how the tissue might have scarred inside or how it's healed up. And so there's like all these different things, like there's an age limit. And so the crazy part about it, she has like, I think like 5 sisters. And any of her sisters would have been glad to do it, but none of them qualified.
Wow.
Which is crazy. It's just like, you got a whole list of sisters? None of them. Wow. Like they were either outside of the age range or hadn't had, like all of them were, they weren't qualified.
Very specific about
they were very specific. Shady Grove is very specific about what the qualifications are, and nobody in their family met the bill. Like nobody.
What's the age group?
So you can't be, I believe that it's like 35, 36. And whenever we started, I was 30. I want to say I was 33 at the time. And so whenever we did the insemination, I was 30. 2019, I was 34. 2020, I was 35. Yep. I was 34. So I'm done too. I'm like, listen, in my mind, I'm like, I can't have no more children or whatever after 35. And so I was like, this baby just meeting the cutoff because I turned 35 in January. Like, we're done. We're done.
So was there an age for young? I mean, what's the limit?
So the age is someone should have already had a child.
Okay.
And so you're not thinking about, there's like some random 20-year-old that's out in these streets having had a child already or anything.
Okay.
Like that,
so I have another question. So you mentioned earlier that you had 2 kids prior to carrying their child. So I know you touched really briefly on the family members having questions around it. Now, how old were your kids at the time that you decided to do it? And you know what? I'm thinking, I was like, wow, being that young, Black children, right? Being introduced to this new concept from a really, really young age. I'm just like, that's so amazing. To me, that's really so amazing to kind of introduce that into their consciousness. Like, there are different ways to have babies. So how did that conversation, like, did you have the conversation with your children? What did that look like?
I definitely did. So one thing that I was very aware of was previously they'd had an embryo placed in someone and it didn't take.
Okay.
And they did it again and it didn't take. And so I didn't want to introduce anything to my children until we knew that embryo was there. It was there to stay. Everything was good. The baby was growing. And so they did the
Did they do one time?
one time.
Okay.
But there was a process. Like I said, Shady Grove, they do this thing where they're like, well, we're going to test hormone levels. We're going to do a pre-test. So they did a trial run on me where I had to like take different hormones and stuff or whatever to see like, is my body going to react effectively? And so they asked, and she asked me, she was like, are you sure you want to do this? Do you want to do the practice round? And I was like, well, when we do it, we want to make sure that it works. And so we did all the extra precautions possible. And so whenever they did do the insemination, they did the transfer. They did the transfer the day before Halloween. And so I was just like, wait, and we went and we did the test and they were like, well, it looks like the baby is catching on. And so I waited until we were sure that it had been successful. And then I was like, well, how do I need to do this? And so I told myself, like, my daughter's birthday was in January. So I was like, the day after my daughter's birthday, I was like, I'm gonna tell the kids. And so that would have been, let's see, November, December, January. So I would have been 3 months. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, let me wait until I'm out of that like first trimester kind of thing. And so what happened was I had talked to her and she was like, I want to be there whenever you tell the kids and like, let's see how this goes. And so I had researched and there was a book about a kangaroo family.
Okay.
And so the book explains like there's these kangaroos and they're jumping around and everybody has like all these little kangaroo babies and there's the hopalots and the hopalots don't have any babies. And so the mom felt really bad. And so they took the hopalots. Another family took the hopalot's little bitty baby and kept her in the pouch until the baby was big enough to go back with their family. And so at the beginning of the book, it says they take a cell from the guy and they take a cell from the lady, they put it together and then they put it inside the mommy's pouch. And so she was here with her husband and like we did this thing because it was my daughter's birthday. And so my daughter wants to be a doctor. Okay. And so they brought like all this doctor equipment. I was like, hey, by the way. And so I sat down, read the book. My children were unbothered. They were trying to like play with these toys. They were unbothered. I was like, we recorded and all excited. This did not go the way that we thought it was going to go. And so I was like, well, and so she was like, well, and so I think it was like a couple of days later, we were at their grandmother's house, my children's adoptive grandmother's house. And my son was like, yeah, so my mom is carrying somebody else's baby. It's not ours, but they just have like a cell from a man, a cell from a woman. They put it together and they put it in my mommy. So my mommy's pregnant, but it's not our baby. And so he went around telling everybody. That was and I was like, I thought you weren't paying attention. Y'all was unbothered. Yeah. And so his sister was doing the same thing. And so they would tell people like, yeah, mommy's pregnant, but it's not our baby. We out inside the garden behind the house and neighbors walking down, minding their business, going to the store. My mommy's pregnant, but it's not our baby. We're going to give the baby to the family. And I'm like, well, I'm glad you know.
Excited.
I'm glad. And so they were like super duper excited. They were very attentive during the pregnancy. They would talk to the baby and they would check on him and all this other stuff. And I'm like, all right, I guess. And so it was good because they didn't get attached like that. And they'd be like, well, when are we gonna babysit him? And I was like, listen, whenever I am no longer pregnant, I will take you over to their house and you can babysit all you want to, because these little 9-10 months that I'm doing, that's all the babysitting I'm doing. And so they're like,
Speaking of attachment though, like what was it, did you find yourself in conflict while carrying the child as far as bonding with the child while you carrying them?
Penelope had that same question on the stream too. So
I think people ask me that, and so my dad is like, they don't know us. And so, like, in my mind, whenever I signed up to do this, I was like, I'm doing this kid a favor, and then we're gonna do Operation Evictus, like once it's time to go. And so, like, in my mind, I have 2 children. I love my children.
Okay.
And that child, I called myself an incubator. Like, that's all I am. I'm an incubator. He doesn't have any, when I tell you this kid looks just like his father, came out looking just like his father. And I'm like, well, you look like your mom a little bit too. He has, like, I just was an incubator for him. I was like, let me give you this little apartment sublet until I let you go. And so in my mind, I was like, this is not my kid. Come July, he's got to go out. The funny part is, his birthday was slated to be 2 days before my birthday. Not my birthday, 2 days before my son's birthday. And so I was like, bruh, because we did all the extra tests. Because originally he was supposed to be, due in May. We did all these extra tests and did all this stuff. And so I'm like, bruh, you're going to have to come. And so it got closer and closer to his due date, and he's still not coming. And so we talked to the doctors, and they were like, well, since this is a surrogate situation, if he doesn't come on his due date, we're going to have to induce you. And I was like, good, wonderful. And so he was due on the 17th. And when I tell you the 17th came, and like my water hadn't broke, and I was like, I'm not about this life. And so we like went and they induced me. And then we got induced that morning. And so I was like, okay, we got induced. We're going to be good. I'm going to have this baby today. And then it was COVID. And so they were trying to get people out of the hospital immediately. So I was like, oh, I'm here for it. And they induced me, and hours passed, 12 hours passed. I'm still in the hospital on the night of the 17th. And now I'm like up here calling my pastor's wife. Like, I'm upset because I'm like, my children are at home. Like, I want to go see my kids. My child's birthday is in a day. Like, I have a birthday party, like a virtual birthday party that I have planned. This is not my kid. And so he came at 4:14 in the morning. And I was upset because I was like, I don't play with my food. They even had me on this liquid diet. I'm feeling a certain type of way. They took me into my room. They took him and his parents into a separate room. And I was looking at the nurse like, ma'am, she was like, oh yeah, I know that you want to go. At 7 o'clock in the afternoon on the 18th, I left out of the hospital. His father was like, where are you going? I was like, home. I did my part. Y'all get to have the rest. Like, this is you. Congratulations. Glory be. And I went home, and I was so glad to be with my children. But I didn't have that attachment, because going in my mind, I was like, this is somebody else's child. I need to carry this baby to make sure that he is healthy. And then, like, there's a contract. It's a long.
Yeah, that was what I was trying to ask you about because I would imagine there are a lot of women who do get attached.
Listen, that contract say no.
But what happens in that instance? So let's say hypothetically that you got attached to the baby, you wanted to keep the baby. How does that work?
So everything, when I tell you that contract is long, and it's accounted for absolutely every possible, like if you die, what happens? If the baby dies, what happens? What if the parents want this? Like, and so I appreciate, and this is why I know, I was like, it wasn't nothing but the Lord, because their thought process and their beliefs lined up with mine. And so things are like, well, what happens if they want to terminate the pregnancy because of if the child has, like, I don't know, whatever situation, disorder, whatever. And so it's like, you have to make sure that you know who your surrogate is, and what your surrogate will and will not do. I talked about a psychological evaluation. These people had me sitting in a room answering like 600 and something questions, like bubbling in. And I was up here tired, like falling asleep. Like, I don't understand. They had me do another psychological evaluation, asking questions. And then I failed. I failed the first one, like the bubbling questions. And she was like, well, I don't think, I have some questions about the way you answer stuff. And she was like, well, you said that, she said that you threatened somebody's life before. And I was like, I have. And she was like, what do you mean? I said, I told this little boy in my class I was going to hurt him. And so she was like, well, what happened? I said, he stopped. And so I didn't do anything. And so she was like, oh. And so she was like, no, we have to double check every question. And so whenever I failed that first test, she gave me another that was like 300 and something questions. And I'm sitting here for an hour or whatever. So answering these questions, she was like, okay, she's okay. And so the mother was like, oh, I knew she was okay already. Like, and so you have to know that person, and you have to be in the right psychological space, because this could have been a whole nother thing. Yeah. Imagine people in COVID, and then you like, I'm in COVID by myself. I have a baby. I've been with this kid now for this amount of months by myself. Like, I've bonded. And so you have to know who you're putting your embryo in.
If the couple decided they wanted to abort the baby, you would have had to agree. You would have to go and do
that because the baby doesn't belong. That's not my egg. Right. That sperm is not related to me.
Mm-hmm. So, and you know this ahead of time. They go over all of this with you.
It's
like
a whole contract.
Everything is right.
You gotta sign it. You can take it to your lawyer. It's a whole. There's no down to everything. Like, they had insurance for me in case something happened during that time, so I could take off like long-term or short-term disability. Like, in the case that I die, what would happen to my kids? Like, what were the provisions? And so everything is in there. And so at first you're like, oh, well, you just carrying somebody's baby. It's like, no, people die during childbirth.
Yes.
And you have to be aware of what happens if I die. What happens to my kids? Because I'm their mother.
Right.
Wow. Now, going back to the initial transfer, was it painful at all?
So, no, it wasn't. And so it's like they have you, I guess, if you were going to have your regular like pap smear that, we do and stuff. And so they have you sitting there, they have someone back and they check the parents to make sure that that's their embryo. Then they double check to make sure that's the embryo. And then they show it to you on the screen in the back. They have unfrozen it because these are frozen embryos that they had. They unfreeze it, they bring it, and it's like on the top of like this thing that's got a camera, but it's so small. And so it just goes up and you see it on a screen and you can see him exactly where he places it in your uterus. And he's like, yeah, this is where we're going to put it. And it was that quick. I don't even think it took 3 minutes. And then that was it.
Wow. Then you wait.
Walked out. He was like, stay still. He was like, stay still. And I was like, but because they tell you to do it whenever your bladder is full so that it's expanded so they can see everything. And so I'm on this table like, I have to pee.
Yeah.
Bruh. And so he was like, you gotta wait. And so you wait, and then I'm like, can I go? And so I was like, mad dash, let me go to the bathroom now. But that was it. And so we're like, let's go eat lunch.
Wow.
And just excited.
And so were you on a strict diet while you were pregnant?
So like, that's the funny thing. So before we did this, so she is a vegan. God bless her soul. That is a whole bunch of discipline. And so I was like, I'm from the South. I grew up Southern. I didn't know what a salad was until I came to college. Like, it was greens, peas, and everything. But I was like, lettuce, I'm gonna eat lettuce. Okay. And so, but I do eat, before that point, I had made sure that I don't eat anything that if I am in the grocery store and I read something, if I can't read what's on the side of the box, I'm not going to eat it. So if it ain't coming out the ground, that's not going to be me. But I'm like, I eat meat, ma'am. And so we talked about that. And so she was like, well, initially she said something about like, don't eat pork or whatever, be careful of that and stuff. So in my mind, I was like, okay, I can't eat pork. So I didn't have bacon. And so I'm like, and I don't even eat pork like that, but I was like, I appreciate bacon. So I didn't have bacon the whole time. And then at the end, she was like, I don't think that we put that as a part of the agreement. I was like, well, Lord, it showed me that I could be disciplined too. It's okay. And so there were like, I don't drink, didn't drink. So I was like, that wasn't an issue. Like, I don't smoke. I don't even, when I get sick, if I have a headache, I go to sleep. If I have a cold, I drink water and I go to sleep. Like, if I have pain, I go to sleep. So I don't take aspirin, ibuprofen, I don't take a Benadryl. And so they gave me specific vitamins that I was supposed to take on a regular basis. So I took my vitamins. And then along the way, something that we haven't talked about, like there's this whole process. So there was a process where I had to like take, I was taking hormones and stuff. And so I was having to like give myself shots in the stomach every morning. And so I was like, I ain't gonna be doing these needles. And so I went to work and I asked one of my friends at work, I was like, somebody said, you know how to administer shots? And she was like, no. And so I was like, well, they gave us this video. We sat and watched this YouTube video. And I was like, you think we could do it? And she was like, yes. And so every morning, 7 o'clock, I would go to work and my coworker would like ball up my little, fat on my belly. And like, she would go ahead and give me the shot. And then on the weekends, I had to do it myself. And so I was like, Lord, help me.
Now go into that with us, the hormone shot. Explain to the audience why you needed that.
So if you have a baby the regular way, your body knows like, hey, what's coming? Like, it's decided to have this baby. But if you don't, then you have to tell your body like, no, you got to get ready. We need to thicken the lining of your uterus. We need to make sure that your levels are the right way. And so in order to do that, they were giving me like shots of like estrogen. And I had to do those every morning. And then at another point, I had like this long needle. And so I had a shot that had to go in my back whenever the baby was actually put in, like whenever the embryo was actually put in. And so every night her husband would come and like shoot me in like my lower back. And I was like, this is what it is. And so they do that until they're like, hey, the baby's latched on. Your levels are what it's supposed to do. Your body's going to do what it needs to do by itself now. Okay. And so like,
you have to do that.
One of them was like, I had to do one for like 9 weeks. Another, I was doing it for like a good like 5 weeks. And it just became like a routine. It was like, okay, shot in the stomach, shot in the back or whatever. And like, there were times where I was like, oh, your husband can do this. And then he was out of town and she was like, oh, I'll do it. And I was like, Lord. And so, but it all worked out. It all worked out. I got my shots. We were good. And so, like I said, like Shady Grove for fertility, they have it down to a science. Like we had a nurse, Doris, who was amazing. She was like, you're going to take these pills at this time. You're going to do this. You're going to take these shots at this time. This is how you're going to do it. Don't do X, Y, and Z. And she was just like, just follow. She would tell me what to do. And then she was like, I'm going to give you this piece of paper to make sure that you know exactly what you need to do. And she was just like, follow every step. She was like, don't worry about it. But whenever I give you something to do, you do it to the T. And that's what we did. We just did everything to the T. Anytime that we needed to go in and like, I remember they had to like look at my uterus and stuff. And so they had to like put water, like fluid. That's like the weirdest feeling for them to like put fluid in my like uterus or whatever. And then like see like, okay, where's my ovaries at or whatever. And then put dye in there and make sure that like they're open and or not open and how is it adjusted and stuff. And so things, I'm like, well, why you got to do that? Like, cause you're not getting the egg from me. And so it's just like a whole process. And it's a beautiful thing for me. Cause I'm like, I had 2 kids to see the process. Cause you don't think about it. You're just like, well, I had sex with somebody, right. Like the sperm went where it went. Then, but I'm like, there's a science to this. And it's not like people are creating life, because that's not what it is. Like, there's no doctors creating life. It's like, well, instead of the sperm guiding itself, like, no, I'm going to put the sperm where it needs to be. Or instead of the embryo being like, I'm going to put them together. And so it was just, it's like, it was amazing. It was amazing.
Wow.
So I felt honored or whatever to be a part of that somebody would be like, yeah, I'm going to trust you with my child.
Yeah. If you guys are just joining us, we are talking to Evette Lang about I'm having their baby. She's talking to us about her journey through in vitro transfer, and I wanted to go into the whole geneticism of the process, because I'm wondering if, let's say, for instance, you were carrying a embryo for a European couple. So that baby will come out European?
That child would look nothing like me. And so people are like, well, he has that kid don't have nothing. He know what my voice sounds like, because he heard me talking a lot, you know, and so he might be familiar with my children's voices because he heard them a lot. And so, or the music that I played, or but I'm like, he is not, if you look at this kid and you look at his parents, you're like, oh, that's their baby.
Because I'm wondering, like, even with, like, okay, so it's still in your womb. So the baby is still being developed by your blood, you know what I'm saying? You know, the foods you eat is nourishing the baby. You know what I'm saying? So the blood that's flowing through you is flowing through him. He's in the in the sac, the water sac. And so I'm wondering, I'm like, in my mind, I'm wondering how can
their chromosomes. It's their chromosomes.
I was just about, you know what, as you're speaking, and if you could go into detail, because exactly what AlQamar is asking is like what you said, Evette. To see it happen outside of your body is to understand really what conception is really about, because like you said, there's a science there. It's like that all of those things happened before it was placed in you. But I need you to go into that, because from what AlQamar is asking, that's what everybody would be thinking too. Like,
how does he not look like you at all?
Break that down in layman terms, maybe.
And so I think that if you take it from the idea of like what I told my the book that I read my children, but change the animal. So all that is an egg and a sperm. So if you were to give me a chicken's egg that has been fertilized, and I put that chicken egg in an incubator, which I was, no matter how much I love that little egg, and I make sure that egg gets the light that it needs and all the resources that it needs in order for it to hatch at the end of the time, when the egg opens, it's not going to look like me. It's going to look like the chicken and maybe the rooster. He has nothing to do with me. I was just a kid. And so it's like, they transferred an embryo into me. And so I'm just a surrogate. I just carried the kid. And so that's why people are like, well, what if people want to keep the baby? You can't keep somebody else's baby. That's kidnapping. You can't do that.
Legally, right?
Yeah, you can't do that. And so he has nothing. You're laughing, but I'm like, he don't got nothing to do with me. Like, he is not mine. And so I talked to one of my friends, because they were like, oh, you can carry my kids. And I'm like, bro, no. Because I'm like, if we use your sperm, right, and I get pregnant with your sperm, this my egg, I'm gonna have problems with half of me walking around somewhere.
Right.
And I'm going to feel like I need to be somehow responsible for this half me that's walking around. I feel no responsibility for this beautiful baby that was created. I'm like, I love the little pictures. He's super duper cute. I'm like, don't let your parents stress you out. But I'm like, I feel no responsibility for him. Like, I did my job. I carried you. I wasn't acting crazy when I was carrying you. And the funny thing is, because I had read, and so they're like, well, you can't have sexual intercourse for a certain period of time, because remember I said they had done all this stuff with my body and introduce hormones to me. So if I had sex with somebody and gotten pregnant and then they put in that other one, it would have been possible that I could have had two babies, one that would have been mine and looked like mine, and then the other one who didn't. And even like whenever we decided, like, are we going to put one egg in, or are we going to put one embryo, or are we going to put two? And I was like, one. We're going to do one. Because I was like,
you're not trying
I'm not trying to have twins. And so even like we were looking at the numbers whenever they first did the transfer, the frozen embryo transfer, whenever they had first done the transfer, and we were like, what if it's twins? And I was like, Lord, because I had like high levels or whatever. I was like, what if it's, I was like, Lord Jesus, this is why we put one in. And so even with them putting that one embryo in, there was a possibility that embryo could have split. There was a possibility that embryo could have split 3 times. And so I was like, we put one in. I'm hoping that it stays, that it stays one. And he stayed one. And so I was like appreciative. But even in that time, there is that possibility, and people have that happen. Like, well, you're a surrogate. And then like, oh, well, you didn't think you was going to get pregnant at the same time. It's possible. And so,
yeah. I've heard different stories and just heard, I'm very ignorant to any of all the, researched evidence around it, but that they now can like determine the eye color and the hair color of babies and stuff through. Have you heard anything like that?
I have not. What I do know is that they can know what the sex of the child is before they put it in. And it's not like they're necessarily determined. So whenever they put the baby in me, we knew that it would be a boy.
Wow.
Because, way back when they used to hang women and do all this other stuff, like you not producing any male seed.
Right.
But that male seed is dependent on the male and not the female. It's based on the chromosomes that he's given. And so it just so happens that family, all of their embryos were male embryos. And it wasn't because they were like, oh, we're just going to have boys. That was his body saying, I'm only going to give this type of chromosome. So all of their embryos were male. And so they had no choice but to have a boy.
I'm not the one that, go ahead, AlQamar.
No, I was just, so they can take the sperm and pick certain sperms.
So they can. So what they do is they get the eggs from the mother and then they get sperm for the father. And so they make all these embryos. And then whenever they make the embryos, they're like, okay, so this is a female embryo, this is a male embryo, this is a female embryo. And so they let the embryo grow like 3 days, or they let the embryo go 5 days. And so all of their female embryos, before it reached the 5 day mark, they were like already eliminated.
Wow.
And so they didn't have anything but males to choose from. So it wasn't a choice. It's like, y'all gonna have a boy. But they're so grateful. They're like, we just want our baby.
Yeah.
And so other people who have embryos that are both sexes, they can choose whether they're going to have a girl or a boy. But then again, they're not choosing. It's just what the male body produces.
I think there's it's not, I don't know if it's called surrogacy, but the word isn't coming to me, but I knew some friends who was considering, I guess it would be using someone else's sperm, but still using the lady's actual eggs, to produce. But I know they had a process they had to go through, and it was like picking height, race, eye color, like all of these. You were able to see the pictures of what do you call it when the people?
So that's whenever men they have like a sperm bank.
Yes.
So they have
donors,
profiles for males, and so you're like, well, his genetics say this,
yes.
your genetics say this, and so in order for the likelihood that he'll have blue eyes, we need to get this particular whatever. That's a lot of work.
That other side, I know about that one as well. So when you were speaking, I'm just like, okay, yeah, there's the other part where people go and they donate to, sperm banks or whatever, and there's a whole process. That's a process even for some people where they literally have to go through profiles, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Looking for, and
Mhm.
these were black people that were considering this, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So if you're a black woman and you're just like, I just want to have a baby, you can go, but you're like, I want to have a black and Asian baby. You can go in there and look for Asian's donor. You know
Wow.
what I mean? Yeah. So that's the other part of it when you were talking about eye color, but that's not even guaranteed. But yeah.
Yeah. I was reading some article a while back and I was like, this is preposterous. But this guy was saying all of the females that he ever conceived children with, he was very cognizant about who he was having children with. And so he made sure that he was like with a woman who had like was very athletic and athletically inclined, not because she was working out, but like her body shape, her body type was like that. And so he's got several children by different women, but all of his children are very athletic. They're very intelligent based on, he was like, I'm targeting this type of woman. If I have sex with this person, knowing that there might be a child from here and I don't need my children to be at the lower rung of whatever. And I'm like, bruh,
People
I
do. I was going to
guess,
say that people do that right now.
I guess.
Specifically, people with money. Yes,
Mhm.
they do. Yes, they
Mhm.
do. They're doing it.
It's a
Yes,
breeding ground.
sir.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think about Michael Jackson, that he was in that way, similar in that way. Now you shared something, another fact. The whole story to me is fascinating. But you said that the mom, not I don't even know the proper terminology, but not you, but the other mom started to was able to breastfeed.
Oh, yes. And so this is another thing. I was like, listen, I breastfed both of my children. But I was like, I remember that process. And so our initial thought was, we're just going to make sure that I give him the colostrum. And so that's like whenever the milk first comes in, it's not even milk, it's like like deep
Yellow.
black,
Yeah.
yellow, whatever. And so there's like all this nutrients in there.
Mhm.
And so she was like, well, you just give me the colostrum and I was like, okay. And then I'm like, I'm drying these suckers up because the way that my breasts are set up right now, listen, these jokers, my sister was like, my sister folding her breasts in her bra and it looked like it might hurt. And I'm like, I don't need to do this again. I'm not here for it. And so we were like, we're going to do the colostrum thing and we're going to cut it. And so I love her so much. So she was like, well, she wanted to breastfeed her child. And so she was like, well, she went to a lactation specialist. And the first time she went, she was like, oh, well, they were able to, get something out of one breast. And so you do not have to be pregnant in order to produce milk. You do not. There are people who produce milk on a regular basis and just be like, here you go, here you go. And people make money off of that. And so she started going to like a lactation specialist and she was doing all this stuff. And then at one point she was kind of, sad about the situation. Like, cause she was like, one breast isn't producing. I don't know how this is going to work. And she ended up getting hooked up with this this milk bank. There are people that just got milk flowing from their breasts. It's just like, well, let's let us share. And so she was like, we got all this milk inside our freezer and like we're ready and everything. We get to the hospital. I done had the baby. And so my nurse comes in and so I was like, well, I wanted to give her the colostrum. And she was like, she over there producing milk. I said, excuse me. So she was actually able to like breastfeed him in the hospital. And so my nurse was like, I don't think you want to do that. Cause she was like, once you start, cause with my son, I was pumping like 9 ounces of milk out at one time. When I first 9 ounces of milk out of each breast every 3 hours. It was like I filled up the freezer at my house. I filled up the freezer at my son's father's sister's house. It was just milk everywhere. And so I was just like, they were like, that's not normal. And I was like, well, it can stop. And so they were like, well, she's producing milk. And so I asked her and she was like, no, she was like, well, you don't have to do this. She was like, you don't have to give the colostrum. Like, it's fine. She was like, if something comes out, because my milk hadn't come in. And so I had like gotten, whenever it did come in, like my nurse was like, whenever you get home, it's gonna come in. She was like, don't do anything. She was like, put cabbage on those things, like keep them cold or whatever. Don't press them, don't touch them, like let the milk dry up. And so the colostrum did come in. And so I'm just like pressing out enough so that I'm not going to be like engorged, because that hurts. Like it hurts. If you've ever breastfed a child and your breasts have ever gotten full of milk, it hurts really bad. And so I did that, and I ended up drying my breast up, but she didn't even have to, she didn't need what I had. And
Wow.
so
You know what?
like your body can automatically, it's about supply and demand. And
Mm.
so if you eat whatever you need to eat or whatever, and you like, you stimulate your breasts, you can get milk.
Wow.
I think a part of it too, Yvette, is the mental piece, because there have been stories of women who thought they were pregnant,
Because
wasn't, and they began to produce milk. Like that information, that research is out there, just even about like the power of the mind, and just to make like we talk about healing our bodies, and and I just think a lot of us don't really believe this stuff could happen, and so therefore we never experience it, or even, but I think like when these things happen, it also is a reminder that we're just like amazing beings, right? There's so
Yes.
much that we can do, and science
Manifestation.
helping like teach us that, because I'm listening to Yvette and I'm just like, yes, like these things can happen, but a lot of us, we don't know that, so we don't even allow it into our own consciousness. But that lady, bless her heart, the mother of the child, uh she was there, she was ready. She was ready. That's like just how you went in saying, this is not my child. It sounds like she went in like, this is my child. And so everything she kind of like encapsulated that, I guess. You know what I mean? Like that became like, this is my child. I'm just waiting to be brought into the world. And I could like I could see why she produced milk. I could see, like I could totally see it.
listen, I was like, what? She did what? And so I'm over there shocked, but I do believe that like the whole entire journey was, yeah, we're following the science or whatever, but like the faith that she
Yeah.
had, like they were
Yeah.
like it. They were like the way her husband was like boom, boom, boom. He was like all this stuff just feel like it just happened so quickly, but it didn't. But then it did. But they like put prayer on everything, and they were just believing like, yeah, this didn't work the last time, but it doesn't mean that it can't work this time. And so she breastfed her child. I don't remember how long she did, and then eventually she stopped, but she got that experience. And so they're like they're such a beautiful family. The baby is just, you've seen the baby, is just like, he is so precious. They are happy, and I couldn't be happier for them. But I know that what happened is a manifestation of like, it's just all of their prayers like lining up and them being in the right place at the right time. And so we were talking, she and I were talking about this morning, and I was like, listen, I said, I look back on the last 2 years of my life, or 2 years, 3 years. So since like our journey started or whatever in like late 2018. And I was like, everything hasn't been good, but everything worked together for our good.
Yeah.
And so everything hasn't been good, but it's definitely been God having his hands in it and moving. So every single time something had to happen, there was a shift, and it might have looked like something bad was coming out of it, but it all was like for the good of everything. Like I have something called I have spider veins. My veins are super duper duper small. I can drink as much liquid as you want me to drink, and my veins won't get bigger. And they had to like draw blood, and I would go. There was one day I went to get blood drawn twice, and they were like sticking me all morning. Nothing. I had to go back. They like no blood. Had to go back the next day, whatever. And so like those things were like, well, it didn't work that day. Why didn't it work that day? But it worked this day. And so everything worked out, and it was a process. It was a journey. It was a beautiful journey. I learned discipline, because I was like, I'm not just eating absolutely every animal. And I was also responsible to somebody else, because I'm like, I have their kid. And so I'm like driving around with somebody's child in my car.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, I gotta be, I'm a careful driver anyway. But I was like,
Yeah.
Lord.
Wow. Yeah.
So I was like, when I was telling you July the 17th, 18th, I was like, take your baby. Please take him. I don't want to be responsible anymore.
Would you recommend anyone to be a surrogate to maybe a fam to help a family out?
I feel like anybody who is in the right mental space, that
Okay.
is very, 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 very important. You got to be in the right mental space. Um, I would say, like, if you are not looking for, like, if you're not trying to have a kid of your own, if you're not trying to have a kid of your own and you're in the right mental space, definitely. And so my son, one thing that he said, he was like, I told my son, I was like, we're just kind people. I don't have a whole bunch of rules for my children. My rule for my children is be kind. And so my son was like, we're kind people. He were like, we're just doing something kind for somebody else because we can. And so it's a great way to like give, and just be kind. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and sound like they do a pretty good job with like keeping you in the loop of the baby development.
Listen, when I tell you, because she was like, wait, she was like, somebody reached out to me about this, and she was like, I didn't know if you, and so so her birthday, this is funny, her birthday is like not far off from mine. And so like we vibe. I absolutely love her husband. We vibe. It's just good. And so even though like the way that we came about to knowing each other. People are like, well, do you know them? I was like, I'm gonna know them after a while. I was like, they done been inside the room with me and I ain't have enough clothes on the bottom half of my body. Like, I don't know how much closer we got to get. Like,
Right.
I'm in the delivery room. I'm like, I delivered my own child. There wasn't no family inside the room with me. I'm like, this man, I was like, stay on this side. Be in the room, but stay on this. And I'm a modest person, which is funny. Cause I'm like, I don't need you to see anything. And so I'm like, cover my legs, doctor. You stay. Y'all stay over there in that corner behind my head. Stay behind my head, please. And so like it's an interesting relationship. And so whenever they send pictures, they're like, oh, he's saying daddy. And I was like, y'all was bullying this child. And so his mom was like, yeah, his dad was coaching him, but now he coaching him how to say mama or whatever. And so he's like in a place right now where he's like wanting to walk. And so it's wonderful to see them like enjoying the baby. And it's funny to hear their stories because people are like, wait a minute, y'all had a baby? When was you pregnant? And I was like, it's funny because COVID happened. And so she quite possibly could have been pregnant. Nobody known.
Right.
But it's a beautiful, their story is absolutely beautiful. And I'm only the ending, but not even the ending, it's the beginning. But they had so much that happened prior to that. And so it's a beautiful thing. So there's the appropriate amount of contact. They're like, no, we need him to know what you did.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh.
Yeah, I find that interesting. I had asked you that before too. I said, I wonder how, the child will be growing up. I mean, will he be curious about you more and things like that? I don't know. Well, just wrapping things up. What would you tell somebody about your scenario if they were interested in going that route that they should know? Or what was like the biggest surprises for you that you may be able to help somebody else out with?
I think that it's just like be prepared at the very beginning because there's like all these tests. And so at first I felt like, goodness, it's a guinea pig. Like you're shooting water up my uterus and you're checking stuff. And so that was like the most, be prepared, be informed. I think that she did an amazing, because she had to go through so much of it because she had tried herself. She was able to tell me, hey, they're going to do this. They're going to do this. Don't be surprised. They're going to do this. And so definitely be prepared. Make sure that whoever you go through is reputable and has a high success rate. Like Shady Grove Fertility has a very high success rate. And so they refuse to do certain people because they're like, we don't want you to get in a place where, the embryo doesn't catch, because when people are like, oh, well, they'll just use another embryo. I'm like, they only got 5. So they don't use 2 right here. They use 1 on me. I'm like, if this doesn't work, you running out of embryos. And so definitely for a person who's going to be a surrogate, just be prepared, be informed, and be ready to understand that is not your kid, but you've been graced with a very special opportunity to be a part of something great.
Wow.
Hmm.
Well, your story has been a fascinating one. We thank you so much, Evette, for sharing your story with us so openly and candidly. Yeah, you should write a book. You really should. I'd read it. Hanifa, you wanted to say anything?
This was amazing, Yvette. Thank you for being a surrogate for that family and allowing them to experience parenthood, actually, and being there for them. And thank you for coming on and sharing the story with us, because I feel like, there's a lot of people who go through what they've gone through in our community, and it's almost like a hush hush thing. Um,
Yeah.
it's a lot more than we really care to talk about. And so allowing this, conversation to happen, someone could be listening and be like, maybe that's something that we could
Yeah.
explore for ourselves, because I think everyone, if anyone that wants to experience parenthood, should have the opportunity to do so. So I definitely want to say thank you for giving them that for carrying their gift. As you say, you were just the incubator. So I appreciate that. I just wanted to say thank you, and thank you for sharing. This was really a beautiful story, and you're an amazing.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you. I'm so glad that you guys gave me the opportunity to share. And if you're able to get them on, like, their story, their before is equally amazing. She said something to me at the very beginning. She was like, some people they save up for a house. She said we saved up for a baby.
Wow.
Mm.
Wow. Beautiful stuff.
But Brother Vaughn came in a little late with a question, but we're about to wrap up. He, uh,
Okay.
he's asking, like, how is it possible to not bond with a baby in your womb?
He's
Uh,
not mine. We friends, but you got to go. Like, it's like, I'm the landlord. I'm glad that I can provide this service for you, but you said you was gonna be here for 10 months. You got your lease is up. Your lease is up, bruh.
I bet
Mm.
that's the number one question you get.
I'm like, he not mine. We had a contract. You got to go. And I get to see him. Like, if I want to see him, I get to see him. His parents, they like are used to seeing my kids now. And so they're like, oh my goodness, we haven't seen your kids in a while. Can we like WhatsApp so that we can, see them? And
Mhm.
so it's a I feel connected to their parents.
Yeah, that sounds like a village.
Yeah.
It's a
So
beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, well, we're gonna end it there. And thanks again. We thank you
thank
so much.
you.
Family, we are here again, Hanif and I, every Monday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on the Empower Hour. Go ahead and like our page and hit the notification button. That way you'll get a message, a chime on your phone whenever we go live, so you don't want to miss any of these hot topics. All right, family, until next week, take care of each other out there. Peace.
Bye, Yvette.
Bye.